Scott Frost is still filling out his staff, and he's doing a great job.
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in to Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you so much for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day. Joining me with the first word from the last word on sports is my good friend, Andrew Gluchov. Andrew, Scott Frost is still filling out his staff, and we're going to start talking about a guy that we mentioned before, but UCF has made it official. They have hired Shawn Clark as offensive line coach. Shawn Clark has officially been announced by the university as their next offensive line coach under Scott Frost. Listen, share with me your feelings about this hire. Again, you talked a lot this year about how offensive line was a bugaboo for UCF here, not being able to pass block for the quarterbacks, and hopefully Shawn Clark will be part of the solution there.
I think this is one of his best hires. Shawn Clark, former head coach of Appalachian State, was there for a number of years, got let go after their first losing season under Clark. You know, they had a 6-6 season, but never below 500 until 2024. They went 5-6, got let go. You know what? One man's trash is another man's treasure. And this is a guy who is an offensive lineman himself and has coached offensive line at multiple schools. So I think this is a great chance for it's a win-win. Clark gets a chance to rehabilitate his career, use this as a as a springboard to bigger and better jobs, and work his way back into the head coaching circuit. And for UCF, they're going to get the benefit of a guy who has a lot of experience coaching offensive linemen. And you know, if you look at UCF and how they've handled the portal, they've been hitting offensive line extremely hard, working on retooling that position group.
Yeah. Speaking of which, Carter Miller, they have signed. UCF football signs offensive lineman Carter Miller. He is now a UCF Knight. Before we started recording, we talked about the significance of this signing. Tell me about Carter Miller.
Well, you know, you look on the surface, you know, a player that flew in under the radar, but did rather well in the Sun Belt, Louisiana Monroe. He's one of a slew of offensive linemen. They got Jakaya Leftwich from North Carolina. They got Gerard Memelar from, I believe it was Washington. And they even got a Preston Cushman from Ole Miss. I mean, we're talking some guys, you know, from Power 4 conference schools joining Miller as part of this revamped offensive line. So as you know, aside from they're going to have to develop, you know, through recruiting, this is a great stopgap to help out a position group that's been much maligned over the last few years.
I couldn't agree more. And look, if you're looking to rebuild a program, you have to start in the trenches. You got to start at offensive line and defensive line. You've got to be able to protect your quarterback, and you've got to be able to run block. Now, we already talked about how hard it is going to be to replace RJ Harvey, a back that, quite frankly, at times made something out of nothing a lot of times in that backfield. So if you can get this offensive line in a healthy place, if you're Scott Frost, I think that you lay the foundation for being able to dominate for years to come. We'll see if Carter Miller is a part of the front end of that rebuild that UCF is trying to go through there. Again, Shawn Clark has got to hit the recruiting trail. Now, they'll lean heavily, Andrew, on what I'd say on identifying talent and being able to evaluate talent early, because until you establish a culture of winning, you're going to have to find those underrated players, I think, to build your program on and try to make UCF a destination where guys want to go and springboard to the next level.
Well, and it, you know, we'll talk about with another coaching hire that came out, you know. Not only is it important to go out into the portal and bring guys in, but it's also important to retain your talent that you already have. And that actually has played a role in some of the hires that Scott Frost has made that has energized some of these players that have gone into the portal enough to come back.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of enthusiasm around Scott Frost's return to UCF. We've talked about the donor dollars that have poured in. Hopefully, we see the talent start to pour in as well. Re-recruiting your roster has become a real challenge for coaches in today's college football with NIL and the portal. It's not that easy to get guys to stay these days. So you have to be promising not only opportunity, but dollars. To get them to stay. Hopefully, Scott Frost will have plenty of that. But look, Shawn Clark isn't the only hire they made official. We're going to talk about UCF's next hire right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Every week until the college football playoff is over, Andrew, I will mention that I made a ton of money betting against Oregon. Blew them out, and we're real happy about that here at Locked On UCF. But no matter who you're betting for, do it with our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. You're guaranteed $200 in bonus bets with your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. UCF has made another hire, and it is one Brandon Harris, defensive backs, continuing to fill out that defensive staff. Brandon Harris comes in. Share with me your thoughts on Brandon Harris here coming in as defensive back coach.
Oh, this is an outstanding hire. This Brandon Harris, his last job was at Florida Atlantic. So this is a Florida guy. He's from Miami. He's actually the younger brother of former offensive coordinator Tim Harris, who was with UCF under Gus Malzahn. So, you're continuing that family connection. UCF has actually gone, went after him as a player. He played in the late 2000s. He actually played against UCF. UCF Miami played in 2008 and 2009 while Harris was a member of that Hurricane squad. So there's connection there. He's seen the stadium. He knows what the fan base is like. Even though it's been a while, he knows what they can be. And this is a guy who has brought in enough excitement that one player who was in the portal, Chasen Johnson, who is a talented freshman, originally announced that he was going in the portal, has announced that he's coming. He's leaving the portal. He's coming back. The defensive backs have been heavily recruited throughout this portal process, as much, if not more, than the offensive linemen. So this is an area that's going to have a lot of different faces, but it's nice to see that a talented freshman like Chasen Johnson, who showed a lot of potential in the defensive backfield, is sticking around for another year.
This is one of the hires that I like a lot. Hiring relatively young head coaches that are not that removed from playing football. Now, he skipped his senior season at Miami to enter the NFL draft. He was a second-round draft pick. And I think that's going to weigh heavy with recruits here for Brandon Harris. We talked about the importance of recruiting. You need that young energy on the recruiting trail, Andrew. I think that Brandon Harris brings that to your staff if you're Scott Frost. So I like this hire a lot. As you try to solidify the defense, we talk a lot about offense and what they need to get together on offense. But, man, being able to stop big plays down the field in the secondary will buy you some time, I think, on offense to try to get that side of the ball together. So defense will save you in your first and second years as you're trying to build the program. And I think that Brandon Harris brings that to the table.
Absolutely. And as you said, he's young, he's hungry. He has a Florida connection, which I mean, we don't have to, rehash how talented the state of Florida is when it comes to, the high school circuit. I mean, we all know, but, UCF's been very successful in the transfer portal. They're 23rd on 247 Sports as of right now. And, they brought in a lot of guys. They lost 22. They brought in 21 or 20. Lost, as many as they brought in. But this isn't done. They're going to still hit the portal pretty hard after the spring. There's going to be some attrition, but you got to get, your coaching staff locked in place. Scott Frost. And we've talked about this, we were a little bit of question marks in the coordinators, but the position coaches, those hires have been fantastic. I've given him an A on his position coach, hirings. And the addition of Clark and Harris officially just reinforces how good this assistant coach squad is going to be.
Before we move on here, we've been giving grades as they've been hiring, Andrew, on this staff. I think we were both at a B the last time we gave a grade.
I was still at a B minus, but that is no longer the case.
Okay, all right. So how have you moved the needle here after Brandon Harris and Shawn Clark have officially been announced by UCF?
I've got a solid B. They're creeping up. I'm still not sold on the coordinators. It's a little bit of a question mark, but with handling a run game coordinator basically to help Alex Grinch, with some of his weak spots, I thought, okay, that covers a little bit. But these last two hires have just been absolutely spot on. You got running backs, linebackers still to go. You got special teams. So we're seeing the coaching staff start to round out. We're almost there. There are names that are floating around, but we haven't heard anything quite official yet. Just stuff that is likely to happen, but until it happens, it doesn't happen. But these names have to excite you a little bit that are floating around for some of these other jobs. I can't wait to see how this coaching staff finishes up and they can actually start the off-season program of putting their plan into place. Pause it. You've gone mute.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think there's a lot to be excited about when you talk about this coaching staff getting their plan into place. Brandon Harris is going to be a big part of that. I wanted to move this to a B+. I really wanted to move this to a B+. There are a couple hires left to go. Is there a chance we could get to an A- by the end of this process? No. Okay. All right.
Not with those coordinators. I don't think he can hit an A- on it. I think, a couple more rock star picks on those assistant coaches and whatnot. I think you're staring at a solid B+. But I don't think he's going to hit A before this is all said and done.
Okay. Well, look. Hit the comments, guys, after the video. Let us know if you think they can get to an A here by the end of the hiring process. You guys asked for basketball. We're talking about it. UCF had a big game yesterday versus Kansas. We're going to talk about that after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at Game Time, Andrew. The college football playoff is on TV right now. There's lots of great things going on. And if you want to attend, you should visit our friends at Game Time. I'm trying to get my family to Auburn versus Tennessee in basketball at the end of the month. Lower level tickets, $1,100.
Oh, good Lord. Right, I had better chance landing Savannah Bananas tickets.
I know. Might have to sell my kidney to get my mom and sister to that one. But look, if I have to, I'm selling it to Game Time. Andrew, look, they've got a feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to events as easy as it could be. Take the guesswork out of buying your tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. UCF took on the number 7 Kansas Jayhawks in basketball. We're still excited about UCF basketball. Weren't excited about the result. Yeah. UCF goes down to Kansas 99-48. Never a great day when you get 50-pieced. But look, I think this is one of those character building games for UCF. So if I'm looking for a silver lining, you're finding out where the cracks in the foundation are, and maybe you come back down to earth a little bit. But I still think this is a very solid basketball team that just kind of run into a buzzsaw on Sunday versus Kansas.
Well, have you noticed that anything that builds character sucks? I mean, this was bad. I mean, I watched this game and it was painful. They had absolutely no answer for Hunter Dickinson up top, and it
12
showed.
17, man. 12 of 17 for 27 points is rough.
And he scored most of that in the first half. I mean, by then the game was over. I mean, he played at, he did whatever he wanted. No one could stop him, which, last year he struggled a lot more when they came to Orlando. And actually UCF had the upset. It was the biggest win in program history. But this time you have to look at UCF's box score to really understand what went wrong, which was everything.
20% from the field, man.
Yeah. I mean, if you're shooting under 25%, you're going to lose. The other thing was the rebounding. They got out rebounded 63-32. It was almost a 2-1 margin.
Yeah.
That not only could they not hit shots, but they had no chance for secondhand points. And they were on the offensive side, it was 22-12 in favor of Kansas. I mean, they shot 50% from the field, which, that's a good day. But when you have the chance to put up 83 shots, which is what Kansas had, and you're hitting 50%, you're probably going to win this game. UCF starting lineup had failed miserably. Everyone had a bad day.
Agreed. Kansas had 62 points in the paint. UCF absolutely could not guard them in the paint. It was a little bit of a disaster, but again, I do feel like it was one of those Murphy's Law kind of games. Look, Kansas is a traditional powerhouse, one of the top 5 winningest programs in college basketball history. They always have a stout squad, and this, I was shocked at the margin of victory. I did not think that UCF would win this game, but I did not think that it would be this bad. However, you've got youth. Mikey Williams is just getting started so far this season, and I think that there's still a lot to learn about your team if you're UCF right now. Like you said, anything to build character sucks. Lots of character building going on Sunday versus the Kansas Jayhawks. Before we get out of here, final takeaways on UCF basketball. Look, we mentioned on the last episode that they've got a number of ranked matchups still left on the schedule. How do you move on from this one and focus on your next matchup?
Well, I mean, the next game is a very winnable game at home against Colorado. Their net ranking is one of the lower ones in the conference at 85. UCF has fallen to 87. This on paper seems to be a pretty good matchup for UCF. This is a chance to hit the reset button, get that bad taste out of your mouth. I mean, as you said, the Kansas game was Murphy Laws. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong, and that's what happened. You gotta get it past you, move on, and really just hit the reset button. I mean, none of the players were focused. They just could not find a groove. So you know what? Play against Colorado, kind of hit the reset button, find that groove, because this weekend we have UCF at Arizona. Arizona's net is in the top 20. This would be a great quadrant 1 victory. Arizona is a mortal team. They're only 8-5, and granted, they've played a tough schedule. They are beatable. So if UCF can go into Lubbock, Texas, and win a game, they can go to Arizona and catch them off guard as well. But they gotta get the ship back on track against Colorado coming up on Wednesday.
I couldn't agree more. Look, you get the game versus Colorado, and then you got to travel to Tucson on the 11th. So in 5 days, they'll be in Tucson. Good for them. Tucson sucks. So hopefully they can go in there and beat a good Arizona team. Yeah, Arizona's a good team. Tucson sucks. I live there. And then you travel up the road. So they won't come home. They'll go straight up the road to Phoenix to play Arizona State before returning home to face off against currently number 12 Houston. So some opportunities in the near future on that schedule for UCF. Andrew, as always, I want to thank you for joining me. Before we get out of here, tell people where they can find you.
You can catch me on Twitter /X or Blue Sky at StatBoyDrew, and you catch my writings on Last Word of College Football, a part of the Last Word on Sports family.
Thank you guys for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day. For your second listen, go check out our friends at Locked On Big 12. Our guy Drake Toll leads the conversation in conference realignment news and pulls no punches when it comes to talking about every team in the Big 12, including the UCF Knights. You can find them on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. You can find us here tomorrow on Locked On UCF.